Welcome to the Silhouettes of Success podcast with your host, successful entrepreneur, broker, and business mentor, Amber Weitzer. Because success comes in all shapes, sizes, and styles, the Silhouettes of Success podcast is shining the light on industrious women with a collection of curated conversations of intentional inspiration designed to inspire your heart, ignite your mind, feed your soul, and gift you with actionable insights directly from inspirational, everyday women who've shown tenacity, grit, and grace, having taken on the challenges in their lives and business and won. Remarkable, down-to-earth, and relatable, Amber and her guests will share with you uplifting and extraordinary real-life success stories, motivational ideas that just might help spark something within you. With the deepest desire to serve you, help you grow so you can begin to shine the light that will illuminate your very own silhouette of success. So, let's get to it.
Hello, and welcome to the Amber Weitzer podcast, Silhouettes of Success. I have a treat in store for you today with our Silhouette of Success VIP featured guest, a product of an artist and an engineer who loved the outdoors. She grew up in a house where things were always being explored, built, or created. After high school, she lived in the mountains, studied, and traveled the world. And guess what? She's been eating a different piece of chocolate every day now for more than 12 years, has painted with melted chocolate. So with that, please allow us to present to you and help me welcome Corinne DeBra. Hello, Corinne. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. So it's a pleasure to visit with you today, and we will have you share your Silhouette of Success story. But if I may I share with our audience how we connected?
Sure, absolutely.
Perfect. So probably a couple months ago, I was looking for a creative outlet, just another skill to learn, and I stumbled upon a course titled Chocolate Online University. And it was recently that I've had time to really begin diving into the course a little bit. And there you were featured in an interview within one of the lessons. And so listening to your story about the chocolate blogging adventures, I was absolutely curious, intrigued, and probably a little envious of your sampling adventure. So please fill us in.
Well, back in 2006, I decided that I was going to learn about blogging, well, actually a little bit before then, and I decided to focus on two interests of mine. So I started a couple of blogs at the same time. One of them, though, was Chocolate Banquet. And so my daughter had made a bet with me that I really wanted to focus on one thing. I was the type of person with lots of interests, and so I really thought, I'm just going to focus on one thing. And I thought, well, maybe yoga, maybe like meditation, maybe like some kind of exercise. And then my daughter walked through the room and she said, Mom, you really like chocolate. Why don't you just eat a different chocolate every day for a year? I can thank her for giving me the idea. And then I sort of took it to ridiculous extremes from there. But I had so much fun that one year. I had no idea that there were that many chocolates. I thought, would I even run out by the end of the year? And the answer was a definitive no. So I could continue eating a different chocolate every day for the rest of my life if I was willing to travel and look at, go to Europe and go to other places that are making chocolate. And this just happened to coincide with the rise of the artisan chocolate maker movement. So it was a really great adventure, and it continues to be a really great adventure, 14 years later. So 5,200 and something chocolates later, I still have not had any trouble finding new chocolates. And in the process was able to really express some of the things that I like best, which is elevating other people. And I have a particular respect for entrepreneurs and small business people, and so many of the people that have gotten involved in making chocolate are just really interesting, multifaceted people. So it's been a real pleasure.
That is so exciting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did I also read where you are a naturalist into hiking and photography, and perhaps a lot of your works are published or in private collections? Share with us, because I know you are definitely multidimensional. So share with us all about that.
Just to back up just a little bit, I'm in sort of a third phase of my life. I mean, like many people, I went to school, I got an education. I feel lucky to have done that. And part of that was for me having so many interests, trying to cram in as much, multidisciplinary things that I could at that time when I went to college. And, I was interested in art and biology and lots of different things. And I also wanted to graduate in 4 years. And so I was sort of building up my skills in the first part of my life. I worked as a congressional analyst. I was an internship and did lots of experiential things. And then the second phase of my life, I would describe as sort of, more traditional path and working for corporations and the tech industry and things like that. So I always was kind of itching to get back to these other lost interests. And so at some point I said, well, I've spent so much of my life here doing kind of corporate grown-up things, and yet, I still really wanted to incorporate art, science, and chocolate, and who knows, some combination of things. And like many multifaceted kind of people, sort of struggled with what kind of website, what kind of personal brand could I take as a next step to do these things, and was finding it really difficult, still being in the corporate world at that point, of having a website that was just made it look like I was jack of all trades and was going off in lots of weird directions. But my feeling is that this serves as any advice to people is just go for it. I mean, just really respect the fact that you have some individual passions and things that could result in something that you may not even realize in the beginning would make perfect sense together. So I sort of said, well, what do you know how to do at this point? Well, I know how to walk and I know how to eat chocolate, so why don't I just take those things and we'll just start from there. So my other blog that I started was called Walking the Bay, and I ended up doing a 1,000-mile walk around the San Francisco Bay with frequent chocolate stops, I might add. But and I ended up leading some chocolate walks along the Bay Trail, which was really fun, particularly in the San Francisco area. But I ended up, as a result of that, being asked to join a board for the San Francisco Bay Trail, and all kinds of things came out of that. So even if you start with things that you're just thinking, well, how could this possibly make sense? Somehow it all fit together, eventually, and made life a lot more interesting for me. And I hope other people too, because my goal for some of this was to help elevate other people and again, with chocolate makers and trying to get them some exposure as well, since that's a tough thing to try to start a business.
So definitely understanding and visualizing more of your silhouette of success and your journey, looking back, as you said, stepping back a couple steps here, how did you transition from your corporate or the business world into being able to just go for it? And maybe talk a little bit about took for you to feel comfortable to transition out of that. What was that like for you?
I'd say that it really, if you're willing to seek out people and spend time with people who really encourage you to be the best and the fullest version of yourself, and whether that's within the workplace, if you're lucky to early on find a mentor or just have great colleagues, or you can even start your own group, a success team or something like that outside of work, embracing these different facets of yourself and being confident about taking next steps becomes a lot easier. So I was really fortunate. I happened to meet some great people. I really sort of was exposed to and continue to try to associate, really great people who made that transition a lot easier. I'd say that just being a multifaceted person makes you more resilient, especially if you're learning how to be comfortable through small successes. There's a hedging strategy where, in today's ever dynamic, changing environment, you've got multiple skills in different areas. It makes it easier to kind of transfer and hop from one area to the next. But I think it also is just more fun and interesting when you're making more connections and you're listening to people with different perspectives. You can be more empathetic, you can be more compassionate, and, more practically speaking, you can see solutions to problems that from other fields that you have experience from or from other perspectives, and come up with solutions that maybe someone who's really very unifocused might have a harder time doing. So I'd say that the big question at the bottom of what I was just saying is, how do you position yourself as a multifaceted person in a laser-focused world? I'd say that by continuing to sort of trust yourself and building on small successes, you certainly have the confidence to sell yourself as someone who is well, let me tell you where this spot, it may look like my resume. It may look like that, I'm sort of jumping all over the place, but here are the solutions that I was able to come up with because of this background, and tie these things together and still tie it back to what an employer or a funder or whoever it is that you're talking with, might be looking for in a person from an employment standpoint or a consultant standpoint even. So I don't. That's a long answer to the question, and I realized I didn't answer some other things that you asked me in the previous question. But I'd say that's probably the big underlying question that a lot of people have when they're making transitions, or they're afraid that if they look like they're going off in too many directions, they're too self-conscious about who they really are, and so they undersell themselves, if you will.
That's amazing. And the way that you have framed it pulls all of those pieces that you've already mentioned about your journey together. I think you're right. It's interesting when someone has so many different interests and is able to really partake in those interests at a decent, if not successful level. It's hard sometimes for the creative and the analytical mind to find a place of harmony within yourself. So it's great how you reframe that.
Yeah, I think that's what we're told. I think there's a lot of things that lead us to believe that the two are really split. But in fact, you can look back at great artists who had really good analytical skills too. Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, was great at tackling those kinds of almost misperceptions. That, you either had to do this or you had to do this, or, God forbid you should be an entrepreneur. And, that sort of for more conservative parents and friends and things like that who are looking after your well-being can really scare people and cause people to sort of worry about you. The definition of an entrepreneur I just read, which is a person who organizes and operates a business or businesses taking on greater than normal risks, financial risks, in order to do so. Well, not everyone's going to be jumping on board and saying, oh, yeah, you should go off and do this. This sounds way too risky, right? So that's why I think people end up forming things like success teams, which was a Barbara Sher concept. Barbara Sher also was sort of a person who wrote about careers and taking risks and has a great sense of humor, I might add. That concept was to, meet with people who aren't your family and friends, who would be more likely to kind of offer support in a small group setting. To encourage people to take the next small step. I think there's lots of things that you can do to help yourself. Isolating yourself and just being worried in your mind about this can be made easier by, again, some sort of small group or hanging out with the right people who might encourage your wild ideas. And again, it's managing risk too. I mean, if you never go out and take risks, and I found even walking the bay, which, again, it doesn't sound like it's related, but these things really do feed each other, and when you're really taking care of, all the facets of who you are, your health and your everything else. So by walking the bay, you get out in front of the rectangles, which we're all in front of these rectangles every day, and you get a chance to literally and physically exercise your eyesight and your big picture skills, and just having that bigger perspective now and then and coming back and then focusing on what you need to, can really help. But again, I think I'm going off in, as usual, in too many directions. I really enjoy talking with people, and I often invite people out on walk and talks on the Bay Trail. I'm on my third time around the Bay Trail right now, but it's just such a lovely opportunity to take a pause and regain some perspective and tie together things and, mull over strategies and things like that, and eat chocolate.
And just always, yes, I throw that in there too. Makes it literally a little sweeter. It's interesting. I'm walking with you as you were talking, and when you speak to separating yourself and, going outside where you can get that clarity and get the bigger picture, there is nothing like the fresh air and taking yourself literally out of the environment where maybe we're just beginning to spin on the hamster wheel.
Right. That's exactly.
To really see, as you say, the bigger picture. Wow. Mm-hmm. That is fantastic. I'm curious, did you happen to look up what the definition of artist was?
No, but I in years past, I remember looking at that, and again, Julia Cameron has a lot of fun with that. I know that when she does workshops, she asks people, like, what's your definition of an artist? Or what are the first words that come to mind when you hear that? And, it's crazy, broke, it's like all these really negative, fearful kind of things. It's like, no wonder nobody goes down this path, or people have their doubts. But that's why I mentioned there's sort of like, whether you talk about your third act, you create as many acts as you want in your life. But, if I'm on the third stage of my life, it makes it a little bit easier for me. I didn't really explore the art part of it, which was on my list of things I wanted to do, until much later. And that turned out to be great timing for me, because had I gone to art school when I was college age, it was all about tearing apart all the previous sort of craft and skill and, all the more conservative aspects of art that had existed for so many years, and just totally starting from scratch and being very abstract about everything. And while that might have been exciting, I think it would have driven me crazy, because I would have wanted to come at it with a little bit more, building crafts and skills and, then taking a creative bent with that. So that probably would have been not a disaster, but the timing is
the
important.
timing. Yeah.
And then not only that, but I think you need to be able to be, again, it's about comfortable with taking risks. And I'd already taken lots of small risks and had really built up an excitement about taking risks instead of a dread, which for younger people might show up as an artist block or a creative block of some sort. I don't have that problem now. It's all just making the time for it and sitting down, and then away we go. It's really not a problem, whereas it would have been probably if I was younger and tried to do that right away. So I came back for the art, science, and chocolate sort of focus that I have kind of in this third stage of my life. A lot of it was timing, sort of going through these different stages and accomplishing other worldly types of goals. And, I am super fortunate to have a house to live in and a warm place to sleep and a roof over my head. And so I'm very grateful about those basic things too. And I always have tried to have multiple sources of income, or, to make sure that the physical pieces on Maslow's hierarchy of needs are sound, that I can take off in these other directions. A lot of this is just establishing the Goldilocks zone in your life. Where's the balance between doing this and that and still feeling good about, where you're headed?
It's so interesting that you shared that. And I will tell you, it was one of those restless evenings last night at 2 or 3 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And, at one point I lay there and I thought, I am so appreciative to have this comfortable bed yeah. and, in a little bit of warmth. And it was interesting that that's the thought that just came to my mind, that put my mind at ease about the other thing, placed it all in perspective. And so I like that you just shared that, because you do have to put those things in perspective and be able to pay attention to those small blessings. But the fact that you sure that you have the ability and you are working to do what you need to do to form those avenues of security for yourself.
What can I say? It's a trust walk, right? Enduring life. I mean, you have to really trust yourself, and you have to be willing to live in a complex world where you hopefully develop really nice, good relationships and supportive kind of infrastructure around your life, so that the financial and the physical are, of course, super important, but, all the other infrastructure that goes along with that to make one feel really grateful and happy no matter what you're doing. A lot of this is, how do you architect your own great quality of life, and, some people have really, they want their house, they've got their house, or they've got their, their physical stuff taken care of, and then that's great. They really don't have that burning sense of, I want to see all 7 continents and all 50 states, and, I want to do this and live life to the height, to the breadth, and the width, the maximum. And that's fine. In some ways, I really envy people who are just really feel blessed and comfortable and just want to enjoy some peace and quiet.
Yeah.
Point. Speaking of which, we've had a giant mixed blessing dropped on us this past year. For those that might be listening to this later, we're recording this in January 2021, and talk about the mixed blessing of a gift of being able to stop and pause and have the time, the gift of time to reflect and to maybe build some new skills, to really just think, collect our thoughts in one place. And so I think for those friends that I know that I really respect, who seem to really be not only financially successful, but successful in other areas. It seems that I've known those people over a long enough period of time to know that every time there's a hiccup like this, if you look at the differences with them is that they take these opportunities, these hiccups, in whether it was the last recession a decade ago or whether it was, they, every single time they are grabbing this opportunity with both hands. And instead of being fearful and hiding under the couch and I don't want to open my retirement statement because I'm really afraid of what it looks like, they are out there rebuilding their entire new strategy for their business or whatever it is. I would hate to sound like I'm being insensitive to the needs of others right now, but this is a giant opportunity as well. And I can tell you there are some interesting people the people that are doing really well right now, and I have to say the chocolate makers, I was worried about, some of the small businesses and restaurants and things like that, but the chocolate makers seem to be doing okay. I think people are still eating chocolate right now. So.
I would hope that they're actually flourishing. So talk to us a little bit about some positive adjustments that you've made in your life to help support these dreams and goals and any growth for maybe what's next in your life.
Yeah, I'd say that because I post every day, I sit down and I have, there is some little bit of self-imposed structure here that, has benefit for taking time for yourself every day to take small steps. Because I think that's a lot of people get caught. They have these big ideas. It's overwhelming. It's how do I execute this? I want to write a book or I want to do this or, and then it just gets discarded or kicked down the road because it's too big. So I'm a big fan, as I implied earlier, of breaking things down into smaller steps. And one of the things that I've done, and one of the things that's why I feel like I'm not really blocked as a creative person, is that the chocolate adventure, I show up every morning, I eat a different chocolate. I made it really pleasant, really easy to do this by picking chocolate, but I write something every day, so I can't skip a day. And so I would think that if nothing else, if I stopped that tomorrow, that if I wanted to write a book or if I wanted to do some of these other things, I would find it much easier because I've sort of created this learned habit of a daily habit in the morning. And whether that's a gratitude journal for some people or whether that's artist way pages or whether that's a blog post or whether that's meditating every day, I would say these are the kinds of things that you can do now, right now especially, that can really help you with what you want to do next.
I agree with you on that, creating those healthy, consistent habits for yourself to give that built-in accountability. So that's wonderful. If you were to have one piece of career or life wisdom advice come to the forefront of your mind that maybe you share with folks or your friends or somebody you are mentoring, what would that be that maybe you would share with us?
I would say fear is not your friend, and the more that you can do to honor who you are, and again, surround yourself with people who, as I said before, have an interest in wanting to be the fullest and the best expression of themselves, and that would give you that balance of support and accountability. Friends like that are just worth gold, in my opinion. Again, you have faith in the fact that you may think you're this strange, weird person that, especially when you're young, I think, where you don't know how these possible things that are popping up as your so-called strengths, might lead somewhere. To really honor that, and you take apart the life of a lot of successful people, you'll find, or at least the people I've found inspirational, you'll find that they had some kind of validation, along the way. If they didn't get it from their original family, they found it by the family they created for themselves over time and that those things start coming together in a way that you might not imagine that would be better than you imagine. So to just, honor who you are and surround yourself by positive forces that are going to help you, in your journey.
That's fantastic. And hearing and listening to everything that you're saying, and of course, I'm taking notes, even though it's interesting because with the adventure spirit that it seems that you have in you, I hear a lot of going down these different paths and discovering paths and it's so inspirational to us and to maybe some that don't have that innate confidence or skill built up yet, to hear you talk through that so they can learn and maybe borrow some of your confidence, as we say, as they take that mini risk, which is probably very big for them. So thank you for talking through all of that. That's pretty phenomenal.
You're so welcome, and thank you so much for inviting me onto this program. And, I really think that you're doing a great service for people, and you're a natural connector and a natural person who, I would think is someone who I would want to work with. And so I really appreciate your asking me to join you on the podcast.
Well, absolutely. It's a treasure having you, and I'm so glad we connected, and I look forward to connecting again. So tell us a little bit about, as we learn to embrace ourselves and our silhouettes of success at whatever level they might be, and as we're wrapping up and respecting your schedule and the time here, and keeping the promise to share intentional inspiration, I like how you talked about that fear is not your friend. Tell us something that maybe has been invaluable to you, that was maybe a nugget of advice or something passed down. Is there something additional that stands out to you? Is there maybe a saying or an author or an inspirational read or something that you would want to pass on?
Yeah, I mentioned a few authors earlier, people like Julia Cameron, for those that are creatively inclined, and then also Barbara Scher, who wrote some great books. For those people in midlife, she wrote I love the title of it. It was called I Could Do Anything If Only I Knew What It Was. And so, she's just got a great sense of humor. She's still active, I think, and but she's written a lot of great books in the past. She had one exercise in her book, I think it was in the book called Wishcraft, again, W-I-S-H, Wishcraft, where she encouraged people to create their own imaginary board of directors. So even if they didn't have access to mentors or people like that, to create your own imaginary board of directors, and just without overthinking it, think of who would be on there, living or not, who would they be? And, you can still, looking at the list tells you a lot about, oh, that's interesting. And it's even more interesting because if you do research on each of those people, you may find out there's some real nuggets of gold in the stories of those people, even if you can't talk to them directly, that really speak to what kind of support you may need in taking your next step. So there are so many great people. I just can't, I could go on and on with lists of people, and we live in such a golden age in terms of the internet or YouTube. Going on there, you can be overwhelmed by inspiration if you want to.
I will be sure and pull all of those resources here into the podcast so everyone can go on and take a look at those. But that sounds like a pretty insightful exercise. So I will definitely be purchasing these resources that you're sharing. So, Corinne, as we close out, where can our audience go to find and support you in your continued success? If you have a website or your blog or socials that you'd want to share so we can support you.
Well, thank you for asking. Anybody that's curious about the chocolate adventure can go to chocolatebanquet.com. That's my site. It's my log of, sort of and featuring of different chocolates every day if you're curious about that. I always keep up some stats and, information. I've been able to virtually travel to 65 different countries where these chocolates were made. So we didn't talk about virtual travel, but that's another thing that some friends and I have been very creative about doing since we can't go travel in real life, if you will. And then I have the Walking the Bay site, which is walking-the-bay.com, which is mostly past-oriented, but, I do update it from time to time where I'm trying to put together some information that I'll be updating soon about how one could walk around the bay and do credit card camping, if you wish. So much as, in Europe in the mountains, you might go from hiking from hut to hut. You could do that, around San Francisco Bay if you wanted to as a visitor and kind of enhance your experience, with on-the-ground experiential kinds of adventures. In any case, those are my two sites that I mentioned earlier. And I don't have a photography website per se, but some of the photographs that I've used, not so much the ones that I've had that have been in shows, but some of those are on the Walking the Bay site, for example. So.
Fantastic. I didn't know about your second website, of course, that you mentioned, walkingthebay.com. So I will make sure and check that out. That's exciting. Well, Corinne, thank you once again for sharing your silhouette of success with us. It has been a phenomenal treat, and you are making the world a brighter place, and I am so honored that we have this time together to share with our audience.
Well, thank you, Amber, so much for what you're doing and also for inviting me, and appreciate the opportunity, and have a great rest of the day.
You as well. Until next time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Silhouettes of Success podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out and join us for all the new episodes. We are here for you and with you. We encourage you to share this podcast on all your socials and pass on the light to help illuminate another silhouette of success. Amber would love to hear from you, and you can find her on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, or head over to amberweitzer.com. Let's connect. Help us all shine and leave us a review too. To find out the latest ways to inspire your heart, ignite your mind, and gain actionable insights, subscribe at amberweitzer.com. We are honored, humbled, and full of joy that you've tuned in. Remember, you are exactly where you need to be, right here with us. This is the Amber Weitzer Podcast, Silhouettes of Success.